let me guess, you're contributing to your 401k every month. Maybe you're maxing it out, maybe not, but you're doing something. And yet you open your app, look at the balance, and think, is this even working? So here's what nobody tells you. There's actually a specific moment, a mathematical moment, when your contributions stop being the most important thing in your portfolio. It's when your money starts doing more work than you are. And it's called the crossover point. And once you know yours, everything changes. And so today, I'm going to show you exactly what the crossover point is, how to calculate yours in about 5 minutes, and what to do differently on each side of it. Because the strategy before the crossover point is actually completely different from the strategy after it. And most people are playing the wrong game. Look, if you're new here, I'm Justin Saffel. I'm an engineer turned investment advisor. I hit financial independence at 38, not 65, by applying systems thinking to my own money. And today, I manage over 12 million in client assets through my asset management company, and I work with high earners, engineers, executives, professionals, and entrepreneurs who are financially scattered despite their high income inside financial engineering school. Look, I'm not here to sell you a dream. I just want to show you the math. It's the math that got me out 27 years earlier, okay? And so what is the crossover point? So the crossover point is actually the moment your portfolio's annual growth exceeds your annual contributions. It's the moment your money contributes more to your portfolio than you do. And this is what it actually looks like. So imagine you're contributing $24,000 a year. Your portfolio is worth, say, $150,000. At 10% return, it actually generates $15,000 in growth. At this point, you're still the engine. But the moment your portfolio hits $240,000 at 10% returns, it generates $24,000, matching your contributions dollar for dollar. That is the crossover point. And before it, the biggest lever is how much you put in. But after it, the biggest lever is time. At this point, you stop being the engine and you start becoming the steward. And so let me tell you a little quick story. I want to tell you about David. So David, 39, is contributing consistently for years, but he came to me exhausted. He said, Justin, I feel like I'm running on a treadmill. I keep putting money in and I can't tell if it's going anywhere. Does that sound familiar? So here's what I told him. You're not behind, you're just pre-crossover. And it just so happens that his crossover number was $240,000, but his portfolio at the time was $190,000. So he was still $50,000 away. Fast forward a few years later, David crossed his number. Same lifestyle, same contributions, just consistency. Now his portfolio generates more annually than he puts in. Look, he's not retired or work optional, but his money at this point is working harder than he is. And that's the shift. So how do you calculate your crossover point? And so let me just step through this clearly and methodically, all right? So there's just 4 steps really, and it's just simple math. Step 1, calculate your annual contributions. So all you have to do really is add up everything going into your investment accounts, your 401ks, IRAs, taxable brokerage, employee match. And so let's just say that that number is $24,000. Step 2, you want to find your crossover number. And so all you have to do is divide that by your expected return. And so I like to use 10% because that's the historical average of the S&P 500 over the last 100 years. If you want to be conservative, sure, use 8%, right? We're not factoring in inflation here. So you take your contributions number, 24,000, and you divide by the decimal equivalent of the percentage. So in our case, 10% would be 0.1. If you use 8%, that's going to be 0.08. And so when we divide 24,000 by 0.1, we get $240,000. That's the number. That's the crossover point. And so that brings us to step 3. You want to check your current status. You want to add up your portfolio value, subtract your crossover number, and that gap is how far you are from that number. So what happens if your number is negative? Well, then you've already crossed it. Your money's already working harder than you are. And so the next step, step 4, is to actually calculate your timeline. And so the easiest thing to do here is to use a compound growth calculator. And you can find one in the link in the description in the tools section at Financial Engineering School. And you just plug in your current value, your monthly contributions, and your expected return. And then you can find out what your crossover point is and calculate your timeline to the crossover point. The date it spits out, you want to write it down. That's when you hit your crossover point. So what actually changes after the crossover point? And so here's what most people get wrong. They think the crossover point is like some sort of finish line. It's not. It's just the moment the game changes a bit for you. And so before you're maximizing contributions, every dollar matters, you're building that base, trying to hit that critical mass so that money starts compounding. After, you just need to not mess it up. And so Charlie Munger was famous for saying the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. And his counterpart, Warren Buffett, said the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. And so after the crossover point, patience is the strategy. You don't need to be clever here. You just need to stay consistent, stay invested, and let time do what it does best. And that's when the math really starts to take over. That's when the thing really starts to happen. And so here's the mindset shift. And I want to be a little bit personal here. So what I see constantly with my clients, high earners, 150K, 200K, 300K, still anxious about money, still checking the market every day, still second guessing every decision. Look, I was one of them too. But when you don't know your crossover point, every market dip feels like a crisis. Every month you don't max out feels like failure. But when you know your number, when you can see exactly how far you are, the anxiety starts to quiet because now you have a system. You're not working on hope here. You're not saving and praying. And so here are a few things that are probably worth noting, okay? So the crossover point is not retirement. It's the point where compounding leads. Your financial independence number is a separate calculation. And if you want to calculate that, again, head over to Financial Engineering School, link in the description, where you can access my calculators and tons of other resources for free, absolutely for free. So the other thing to note is that the returns I'm using are actually estimates. They're not guarantees. Markets fluctuate. 10% is the long-term historic average. Given a long enough time horizon, that's what you should expect from the S&P 500. You just want to use it as a planning tool, okay? And if you have tax advantage accounts, 401ks, Roth IRAs, HSAs, those compound a lot faster, so just keep that in mind. And so here's what I want you to do right now. Pause, open your accounts, calculate your annual contributions, divide by 10, and that's your crossover number. If you want, subtract your current value. That's the gap, right? And then if you want, drop it in the comments, right? Not because I'll judge it, but because naming it actually makes it real. And so David named his. A few years later, he actually crossed it. Your number is probably closer than you think. And once you cross that number, your money actually starts working harder than you do. And this is not like some sort of weird metaphor. It's really just the math. All right, so I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.